Greetings, all. Welcome to Aquarian Diary. I'm your host, John Irving. It is July 3rd, 2025. There's been a whole bunch of things on my mind lately, and this is one of them. It's something I was pondering last night, and then it came up during and after my spiritual practice as well, which is that I think many of us may have overinflated or exaggerated expectations for how this process of what many people are referring to as ascension is going to play out on Earth and be reflected in social norms and ways of behavior. It's not going to be like suddenly everyone is in a state of enlightenment. What's true for me, and it may be true for others as well, is that throughout my life, I have only actually encountered a handful of people who I think were very spiritually advanced, like a handful. And I've met many people through all my explorations of spirituality and spiritual practice and yoga and things like that. But just because somebody is interested in those things doesn't necessarily mean they are especially evolved. They are most likely on a spiritual path, but where they are on their journey, who's to say? And I've known many, many psychics over the years too, some really wonderful, gifted people. But just because someone has psychic abilities doesn't mean that they're especially spiritually evolved. I've met people with really powerful psychic abilities who otherwise, in terms of their aspirations and everything, were fairly average people. I'm not trying to be judgmental. That's just my experience. I'm not saying that somebody who has psychic gifts can't also be a very spiritual person. But back to my point, which is that throughout the course of my life, and I've been doing spiritual stuff since my early 20s, and I've had very many powerful spiritual experiences even prior to then that I didn't really have a context for at the time. But my point is this, really, in terms of like the collective, what we're going to see is effectively, think about it kind of like a pyramid. And again, I hesitate to use this kind of a metaphor because it sounds like I'm promoting some kind of a class system or something, and I'm not. It's just a fact that some people are older souls and some people are younger souls. That's just the way it is. But the way it's going to work is that the lowest common denominator is going to be raised. The bar is going to be raised. And absolutely, that is going to be reflected in our experience of the collective. And we'll see it mirrored in the collective as well, where things below that new threshold will no longer be tolerable or accepted and probably simply won't even exist. So we are being uplifted. There's no question about that. I can see it happening all the time, and I feel it too. I'm experiencing it on a day-to-day basis, and it's quite something to behold. It's quite remarkable, really. But for the masses, a lot of people will be living their lives in many ways like they did, but simply elevated. Now, maybe towards the end of the age of Aquarius, maybe in 1,000 years or 2,000 years, we'll be at a very much higher level of vibration. But don't expect suddenly that everybody is going to be behaving in a radically different way. It's just not going to happen. If you go back, and I know this because I'm old enough, if you go back to like, I don't know, the 60s, 70s, 80s, people who were really spiritual, it was a very niche thing. And the real hardcore people would go and do things that normal people would never even think about doing. They might go to an ashram somewhere and study with a spiritual teacher and walk away from, civilization in effect in many ways. And they might engage in like hours a day of meditation and spiritual practice. And typically they would kind of isolate themselves from the mainstream so that they could be very, very focused. They were definitely outsiders. Now, I'm not necessarily advocating that people do that. I have done it in my own way at times. I've spent quite a bit of time alone and quite a bit of time in spiritual practice, and I wouldn't change a thing. I would totally do that again. I love it. Give me a beautiful place in the country where it's peaceful and quiet, and I can just do what I want and be surrounded by nature and not scaring the animals and stuff. I love that. It's wonderful. Not that I have to be completely alone, but, the idea of having your own space, it's just much easier in many ways to manage your energy and your consciousness. My point, though, is that the really hardcore people are devotees. They will devote themselves to a spiritual life and a spiritual practice, placing that above pretty much everything else. And they will make a lot of sacrifices to do that, very, very dedicated and concentrated and focused. They will generally also kind of like avoid people who are not in that paradigm. It makes sense. Like if you want to make rapid progress, you have to be very concentrated and focused. And I think that will still be true going forward. You're probably not going to find these people on platforms like YouTube or spending a lot of time on things like social media and stuff. You're just not. Why would they? Because from a very spiritual perspective, this is all an illusion. It's school. It's not really, in air quotes, real. Right? I've actually had that experience of seeing reality that way in my early 20s, actually. That perspective where I saw that most people were just acting out their characters and their roles in their life without even knowing that that's what they were doing. And then interspersed amongst all of them, and there's lots of them, there's a few people who kind of like know that they know, right? Or at least they know that they don't know, but they're rare, okay? So if you're one of those people, we need to be careful not to have unrealistic expectations about reality and human affairs. It's not like suddenly the world is going to be like one big love fest overnight, and all of human priorities and focus and attention are going to just change. That's not going to happen. Maybe, like I said, towards the end of the age of Aquarius, 2,000 years from now, it could be a completely different experience here. But that's not going to happen in your lifetime. I can promise you that. So the reason that this is an issue is that because we can be somewhat disappointed when we look at the world and we see reality and we see how low consciousness it is. Because it is. And that can be upsetting because we don't like that, understandably. But that is the way that it is. So if we have unrealistic expectations, we can be disappointed. And that's what I wanted to point out here today, because I know that many of my listeners are those kinds of people. And I'm with you, right? We are kindred spirits. And not many people speak to us or hear us because they can't. And they may never. Not in this lifetime, anyway. I had a bit of a sabbatical this winter where I didn't publish a lot. This is the third episode I've published recently. In case you didn't get notified about those or didn't see them, check my channel. This would be the third episode I've published in the last week. And if you have inquired about a reading and haven't heard back from me yet, the squeaky wheels get the grease. So I have quite a backlog. But I do take people's level of interest into account. So let me know. For more detail, check the episode description for other episodes or articles that are related or that I mentioned. And if you're interested in a reading with me, I'll put a link to that as well. Many sincere thanks to everyone who supports me, especially my YouTube members and astrology clients. Thank you very much. Take care, all the best, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.